Good afternoon. My name is Bakari Sellers. I am a 2005 graduate of Morehouse College, but even more importantly, I'm from the big city of Denmark, South Carolina, where we have 3 stoplights and a blinking light. And my mom and dad always say the 2 most important words in the English language are the words thank you, and they're not nearly said enough. And so before I begin, as your host for this afternoon, I want to say thank you to everyone who's under the sound of my voice for taking some time out, to all the dignitaries who are in the room. I saw Sherrod Brown in the lobby, who will be visiting a lot of early states like South Carolina and Iowa just randomly. Also, Tim Kaine I saw milling around, but I want to say thank you to all of you all and our special guest who I'll acknowledge shortly. We're going to have a slight change from the program, and I'm going to bring up what I always say to be one of my top 2 or 3 favorite HBCU presidents. My favorite HBCU president is a young man named Cleveland Sellers, who has henceforth retired. And I guess I got to put Dr. Thomas up there since a lot of my alumni dollars go to Morehouse. But in South Carolina, we are so honored and we are so privileged to have Rosalind Artis as the president of Benedict College. And Rosalind is going to come up and introduce a young man who will have to be leaving us soon after he speaks, but I actually served with him in the South Carolina General Assembly, and I will tell anyone this. When issues regarding individuals of color arise, I made no hesitation, whether or not it's opportunity zones, whether or not it's criminal justice reform, or whether or not it's historically black colleges or universities, to go knock on the door of Tim Scott. A Democrat or Republican, I'd say that when issues of color arise, speaking out against racism in his own party, I think it's okay to simply step back and say thank you to my good friend. And I'm going to have Rosalind Artis come up and do his official introduction, but as a friend, I simply want to say thank you, Tim.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Bakari. As president of Benedict College in Columbia, South Carolina, it is my distinct privilege to introduce Senator Tim Scott, who has served as a champion for HBCUs, bringing many of his congressional colleagues along with him. Mr. Scott's outside-the-box thinking and ability to reach across the aisle has resulted in many pieces of legislation with positive impacts on our schools, historically black colleges and universities, and the communities they serve. From, as Bakari indicated, opportunity zones to criminal justice reform, Senator Scott has led the way in meaningful ways. As a leader on tax reform, education, and job training, and innovative ideas to reinvest in our nation's distressed communities, Senator Scott brings a unique perspective to the United States Senate. Growing up mired in poverty from a single-parent household, Senator Scott says that he is living his mother's American dream, and through his opportunity agenda, works every single day to ensure that every American family has the opportunity to succeed. Prior to public service, Senator Scott built a successful small business of his own. He was first elected to the Charleston City County Council, to the South Carolina State House, and to the U.S. House of Representatives. In January 2013, he was sworn in as a United States Senator from South Carolina and was handily reelected in November 2016. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Senator Tim Scott.
Good afternoon. How's everybody doing? Great. Excellent. I love that. Well, one of the reasons why I am excited about being here with you today and co-chairing the HBCU caucus in the Senate is because I understand and appreciate the significant contribution that education makes to a good life. And as we celebrate things like the opportunity zones or the criminal justice reform package, one of the things we ought to celebrate as a forerunner to good legislation is good education. And so often we think about ways to reform our criminal justice system. I will tell you that perhaps the fastest way to end the conversation about reforming our criminal justice system is to put more focus on our educational institutions. Because as a kid who struggled in high school, actually I did more than struggle in high school. Unlike Bakari, who graduated cum laude, I graduated thank you laude. As a kid who flunked out of high school as a freshman, I know firsthand. Now, I did. I flunked out. She's laughing at me up there. Yes, it happens to, yeah, thank God, right? Look at me now. Now you know what happened to me, see? So I failed world geography and civics. Now, civics, of course, is the study of politics. After 6 years in the Senate, I am not the only one failing civics in our country. Just as a side note. Now, had I gone to Allen or Benedict or Claflin or Morris or Voorhees, maybe I would have had a better experience with more nurturing along the way. But before I got there, I had to have the powerful love of a strong, praying mama who prayed me through my hard times. And I was thinking about your 75th anniversary and my mother's 75th birthday. I just celebrated her birthday a few weeks ago. And I threw her a big party. And I did all that I could do to make sure that she understood the amazing impact that she had on my life and the life of my brother. And so I called all my friends. Yes, I have a few friends. One guy named Van Jones on CNN. I called Van. Yeah, it happens every once in a while.
He called Van and didn't call me.
Actually, you haven't returned my message yet. I called Van Jones, who did a little video for my mother's birthday, and he said, let me work on some more videos for you. So we got in touch with T.D. Jakes, and T.D. Jakes did a video my mother loves. Anybody remember Jesse Duplantis? Did a little video for my mama, and a guy named Darius Rucker, who's a South Carolina phenom, did a video for my mother, and we had other folks who did videos for my mama, and we had a great celebration because her impact on her two sons is undeniable for both of us who have walked in her shadows, who have flown high because she has been the wind beneath our wings. And I asked myself, what kind of celebration should we have for UNCF 75 years later? Just in South Carolina, because of the scholarships and the activity, the lifetime income impact from those students flowing through the benefits of the United Negro College Fund, $5.2 billion of lifetime income created because of the scholarships and the opportunities afforded those students because of UNCF. Thank you. I thought to myself that if we were to measure success by the 463,000 students who have participated in scholarships, if we were to measure success by the $5 billion in scholarships through the UNCF, we would start to understand the critical role that the UNCF plays in promoting and encouraging a powerful America where dreams still come true. And my thought is, it should be as close to common sense that we would gather together on the Hill and make sure that we keep a priority on HBCUs. It doesn't matter whether you're on a Republican side or a Democrat side, or whether you're black or whether you're white. You must understand that the glue that keeps us moving in the right direction so often is found in the powerful, positive education plus faith that you receive at so many HBCUs. I'll close with this. We all are so familiar with this. But in 2015, we all endured the mass murder at Mother Emanuel Church. My uncle attended that church for over 50 years. My friend and Bakari's friend, Clemente Pinckney, and 8 parishioners massacred in my hometown. But when you watch just 36 hours after that tragedy, you heard 9 family members offer forgiveness, understanding the power of Matthew 5:44, to love those who persecute you, to love your enemies, to pray for those who persecute you. And if you ask yourself, where did that kind of love and forgiveness, where did that power to bring illumination in the midst of darkness come from? If you read their bios, the one thing that is incredibly crystal clear is that their faith foundation was encouraged and strengthened and fortified at HBCUs. So when I talk about the glue of our society, I'm not talking simply from the perception of positive things that flow out of HBCUs. I'm not simply talking about the fact that half of our generals in the military flow through HBCUs. I'm not talking simply about a third of our teachers educating our kids today come through HBCUs. I'm talking about the very foundational fabric of this nation is nurtured and encouraged through our HBCUs. And the world stopped to pay attention to Charleston, South Carolina, because 9 families and their family members who were appropriately educated in faith and in education rose up in the same fashion as Bakari's father in 1968 in response to the Orange River Massacre. Stood up, stood tall, and said, "Count me in. Count me in for forgiveness." Not from a weak position, but from the strongest position. Thank you. 75 years later, thank you for what you do to make sure that America remembers the power of a good education and strong faith.
Next, we're going to have another slight change in program, but all of these things are for the better, and all of these things are good because I have a good friend who's in the room. In fact, I spent time with him in Richmond not too long ago at the 100th anniversary of the Richmond NAACP, along with Mayor Stoney and a few others. But he was an awesome governor. He was an awesome United States Senator. Would have been an amazing Vice President of the United States. But I want people to know that a lot of times being present is valuable. And you look around the room, I want to thank not only Tim Scott, but I want to thank Congresswoman Alma Adams, who is in the room. Give her, thank you. Congressman Louis Gohmert is in the room. There he is. And as more members come in, I will acknowledge them as they come, but I want you to know that being present counts. And so look around the room, and when you see these men and women of Congress, understand that it's about a mile away from where they're working. But the ones who are in the room thought it good enough for them to walk that mile over here to spend some time with you, and I think that counts. And I want to introduce my good friend, the United States Senator from the Commonwealth of Virginia, Senator Tim Kaine.
Hey, good afternoon to everyone, and happy anniversary. You don't look a day over 74. 75 years when you think about 1944 and the state of the country and the state of the world in 1944, and then you think about today. I don't know what the Vegas odds were that the UNCF would make it to 75. If Vegas was given odds then, it might not have been too high, but you have persisted and thrived because your mission is right. And because the institutions, the HBCUs around this country are so strong. I'm a neighbor of an HBCU. I live closer to my nearest HBCU than that 1 mile from the Capitol to this hotel. Virginia Union is a neighbor of mine in the north side of Richmond. I've been a partner. As a mayor, I worked closely with Virginia Union and Virginia State nearby in programs for our metropolitan area. And then as governor, I worked with those institutions and with Hampton, Virginia State, Norfolk State, Virginia University of Lynchburg. I also have been in state government at a time of challenge. We had an HBCU, a wonderful HBCU with a great history, St. Paul's in Lawrenceville, Virginia, that had to close. It's not easy running a college. It's not easy running an HBCU. There's challenges out there. But in addition to being a partner, I'm proud to say I'm a consumer. I am a consumer. My children were educated in the Richmond Public Schools, and most of their teachers over the course of their years through the Richmond Public Schools, they combined spent 40 years in the Richmond Public Schools. Most of their teachers were HBCU grads, and I got a chance to see their dedication toward education of all children and their passion. And my kids are out in the big wide world and doing all kinds of wonderful things now because of the thumbprint that good educators put on them. I am thrilled to be on this honor roll. I have no excuse for not being on this honor roll because I have so many friends, so many neighbors, so many colleagues who, if I ever veered off the path, would yank me back to the path quick. My wife was the Secretary of Education in Virginia who worked so closely with our HBCUs, and as governor, we did some wonderful things that I'm trying to replicate now in the Senate. For example, we used Virginia's Public Building Authority, which was focused on public buildings. We used the Public Building Authority to finance facilities on our HBCUs, even those that were not public institutions. Hampton is an example. And so we were always looking for ways to use the tools of the state to help our HBCUs achieve tuition assistance grants, which are critical in virtually all states. And now I have the opportunity to serve on the Health, Education, Labor, Pension Committee. And I have a feeling the reauthorization of the Higher Education Act has been a subject of some significant discussion and will be when you go up and talk to your members on Thursday. Let me just say, make an ask and offer an opportunity. So on the ask side, the Higher Education Act reauthorization is a spectacular opportunity, and we won't repeat it for a long time. You know, traditionally, if we do this, we would not do it for another 5 to 10 years, which means we have to do it right, and we have to do it not right for today, but we got to do it right to last. And we need to make sure, as we work on this, that the Higher Education Act reauthorization has robust programs to include HBCUs in everything we do and advance opportunities. Two that I'm working on that I care very, very deeply about are first making sure that HBCUs have access to capital funding for campus improvements. That's really important, and there's ways that we can do it. Cory Booker and I, Tim Scott, a bunch of us are working on an HBCU capital bill. And then second, because you do train so many of our teachers, and because kids need to see teachers in front of the classroom that look just like they do, I have a bill called the PREP Act that deals with the teacher preparation part of HEA, which is Title II of the Higher Education Act, and to really focus energy and attention on the role that HBCUs specifically play in training today and the future workforce that we're going to need in the classroom. So those are two things that are important to me as we do HBCU, and I know they're very, very important to my dear friend, who I love to now call chairman, the Education and Labor chairman on the House side, Bobby Scott, who feels as passionately about this as I do. So the opportunity is so powerful right now to help us get HEA right. An ask, it's another opportunity. This isn't just the 75th anniversary of UNCF, it's the 400th anniversary of the arrival of Africans into the English colonies, brought ashore at Point Comfort, Virginia, which is now Fort Monroe, a mile or two from the Hampton main campus, brought ashore as slaves, captured off a Portuguese slave ship, brought in involuntarily into Virginia, into a very questionable status. They were slaves because they had been captured involuntarily, but they landed on soil that at the time didn't have an institution of slavery. The Virginia General Assembly created the institution of slavery in the English colonies because it was okay for whites to be indentured servants, but it wasn't okay for African Americans to be indentured servants. So what happened over the course of about 2 decades in Virginia, our legislature did this, abolished the institution of indentured servitude, and white indentured servants became free, and also abolished the institution of indentured servants for African Americans, and they became slaves. We have a very painful history, and we're still living it. We're going through some pain right now, pain of racial insensitivity that we've got to think our way through and get better at. But I'm mindful of the role that your institutions can play in this year, this 400th year of really being candid about the story and orienting us toward a better future. As I introduced a bill with Bobby Scott a couple years ago in Congress to create a 400th commission, a federal commission to help us think about what this 4 centuries means, this is what I told my colleagues. Congress had a federal commission that Congress passed to celebrate 400 years of the English at Jamestown because our English roots matter. We had a federal commission to commemorate 450 years of the Hispanic settlement at St. Augustine, Florida, because our Hispanic roots matter. And when I introduced the bill with Bobby in 2016, I said, if our English roots matter and our Hispanic roots matter, then our African roots matter, and we should tell that story of the 400 years, or do our best to do it. We can't completely tell it. We're human. It's a story that's too vast. But we need to try everything we can, and your institutions can all do things around the August anniversary of the arrival of these first Africans who have fundamentally transformed our society. Last thing I'll say, I always say this when I talk about the commission and the need to really get the story. If you think about 400 years divided into 8 half centuries, and then think about the story of the African contribution to this country. For the first 5/8, Africans were enslaved. For the first 5/8 of this history, Africans were enslaved. And even those free, even those born free, even those born to free black parents were ruled by the Dred Scott decision to not be citizens of the United States. So 5/8 of our history of these 400 years has been slavery and legally mandated non-citizenship. 2/8, the next 100 years after the Civil War, there was no slavery. 13th, 14th, 15th Amendment, no slavery. And yet there was legally mandated, legally accepted second-class status in education, in criminal justice, in housing, in public accommodations for the next 100 years. And it was only with the passage of the Civil Rights Acts in the 1960s that for the last 1/8 of this 400 years, African Americans have been legally, not necessarily socially, not necessarily economically, but legally treated as equal citizens in this country. When people wonder why we still have legacies of racism and slavery, or why insensitivities like blackface photos and things like that pop up, or why you can get a video just about every day of somebody treating an African American person who's just walking on the street or having a picnic or shopping at a store in such an insensitive way, we have to grapple with the fact that 5/8 of our history, Africans in this country were held in slavery and determined to be not citizens, and then for the next 2/8 of our history, they were legally mandated as second-class citizens. So we have a long, long way to go. The institutions that you represent, better than anyone, can help us tell the story in a way that will orient us toward a better future. You know, Faulkner once said that history is the effort to create a usable past. If it's just about the past, it would be of interest to historians, but we ought to create a usable past that we can use for a better future, and your institutions do that every day. Thanks so much. It's great to be with you.
I was tapped on the shoulder and given a note that in big words said, y'all could eat now. I guess somebody complained. Whoever complained about eating, please go ahead and begin. Well, we're going to get the grace. Some of them have already started eating, but we're going to get there. I want to keep the program moving as smoothly as I possibly can. This is going to be an amazing day. I need to challenge all of you all who are on Twitter, and as my dad refers to it, the Instagram, to make sure that you're tweeting and posting and doing all of, is this the right room for that? Doing all of those things necessary. Make sure you're tweeting and posting Hashtag HBCU strong and tag UNCF and all of your things, and I will be retweeting those to all of my trolls and followers and all of those good things as well. It is now my pleasure to introduce Reverend Dr. Bernard Richardson, who's the 4th Dean of the historic Andrew Rankin Memorial Chapel. He is the appointed officer for religious affairs at the university, all ministries and religious services and programs for the Howard community and the DC community at large. Dr. Richardson is also a tenured associate professor at the Howard University School of Divinity and has made scholarly contributions in the area of pastoral care and counseling. He holds degrees from Howard University, Yale University, and Michigan State. I do not believe he will keep us too long, but he is an ordained minister in the AME Zion Church.
All right. Dean Richardson.
Let us pray. Most gracious and loving God, you are the giver of every good and precious gift. We give you thanks for the gift of this day and the gift of what will be accomplished in our time together. We are aware, O God, that we assemble in a time of great challenges in our nation. We give thanks for the UNCF for their vision and their commitment in helping us to see the possibilities that also exist. Remind us, O God, that we have come this far by faith. We have persevered because of our commitment to helping those who will follow after us. As we examine the state of HBCUs, we ask, O God, that you give to us and to others eyes to see, ears to hear, hearts that will feel and know the creativity, the possibilities, the power that exists within historically black colleges and universities. Make us to see the thirst for knowledge and the commitment to excellence and service in the faces of the gifted and talented students that are nourished by these institutions. May the ideals of scholarship, service, and pride that permeate the culture of HBCUs, the contributions that their graduates are making in communities across this nation and throughout the world, remind us of why we are here and why we will persevere. Remind us that you still have a future and a hope for our HBCUs. Bless now this food for our use and us for thy service. Bless now what our eyes will see, our ears will hear, our hearts will feel in our time together. And in your name we pray. Amen.
And while we are eating, we will keep the program moving because we know that people have things to do after this lunch obligation. I want to recognize also who are in the room and who deserve our appreciation. Y'all are treating this like greet all the friends in church time, huh? After the acknowledgments. We're going to keep the program going. I want to make sure that we acknowledge 3 more people who have entered the room who deserve our praise for being here. One is Congressman French Hill. May you please stand well, there you go. It's good to see you. The illustrious Chairman Bobby Scott entered the room. Where's Chairman? There he is. What's going on, man? And of course, United States Senator Sherrod Brown. And it's not Sherrod, it's Sherrod, okay? I want everybody to understand that. As we continue, I have the awesome opportunity, and it feels so good to be surrounded by these amazing African American women who are leading these institutions of higher learning. Y'all notice that only the women clap. We didn't get a lot of, that's okay. But I want to introduce Dr. Beverly Wade Hogan, who's the president of Tougaloo College in Jackson, Mississippi, to come up and introduce our next guest.
Good afternoon to all of you. And let me just say, as a point of privilege, before I start, on behalf of our member presidents, let me thank all of you for uplifting the significance and relevance of our historically black colleges and universities today. These institutions are absolutely significant and relevant to our nation's progress across the board, from global competitiveness, from national security to innovation and wealth creation. These institutions have been on the forefront of these progressive changes that America has made and will continue to make, and I thank all of you for your support. It is my pleasure to introduce to you the president of UNCF. Now, having served as a president of Tougaloo College for over 17 years and been involved with the UNCF Board of Directors and as the member chair of the UNCF member institutions, I've seen a lot of progress, and I've experienced firsthand the importance of partnerships and collaboration across sectors and institutions. In fact, I will tell you in a word that collaborations and partnerships with secondary and post-secondary educational institutions, businesses, the government at all levels have really been the strength of Tougaloo College. We could not have done what we've done over the years, for 150 years this year, without those kind of collaborations and partnerships. And UNCF has built its reputation on these collaborations and partnerships. And this year, UNCF celebrates its 75th year of success in supporting and helping to sustain our institutions, and helping our institutions to realize impressive student outcomes that impact the social, economic, and political development of our nation. And we could not have achieved much of this without the leadership of my friend and colleague, Dr. Michael Lomax. Dr. Lomax has served as president and CEO of UNCF since 2004. Under his leadership, UNCF has raised more than $1.5 billion and helped more than 110,000 students earn college degrees and launch careers. Additionally, on an annual basis, UNCF enables 60,000 students to go to college with UNCF scholarships and attend its 37 member historically black colleges and universities. Dr. Lomax oversees the organization's 400 scholarship programs, which award 10,000 scholarships a year. He also launched the UNCF Institute for Capacity Building, which helps UNCF member HBCUs become stronger, more effective, and more self-sustaining. For 15 years, Dr. Lomax and UNCF have fought for college readiness and education reform through partnerships with reform-focused leaders and organizations, and work to further advance HBCUs with Congress, the administration, and the Department of Education. Before joining UNCF, Dr. Lomax was president of Dillard University in New Orleans and a literature professor at a UNCF member institution, both Morehouse and Spelman colleges. He also founded the National Black Arts Festival and served as chairman of the Fulton County Commission in Atlanta, the first African American elected to the post. And now, may I present to you Dr. Michael Lomax.
Thank you. And good afternoon. You know, as Dr. Hogan noted, I have I don't know what the exact adjective is. I was going to say a little shaky background as a former elected official. So I'm accustomed to luncheons where there's a lot going on. And we've got the servers here. Let's give the servers a big hand because they're going to do a great job for us. But this has been a labor of love for a large team at UNCF to pull this luncheon together. This is a very important occasion for us. And an opportunity for us to not just hear and talk with friends, but to share our agenda. And so I'm excited to be here, and I want to thank Bakari for coming up from South Carolina to be with us, adding the glitz and glamour of a CNN. And CNN has done a great job diversifying who we hear from. And I'm just delighted that they often call upon graduates of historically black colleges and universities to add a lot of legitimacy to what they have. So let's give Bakari Sellers a big hand. And I want to thank my dear friend, Beverly Hogan. Now, she's smiling a lot today. And those of us who are in the business of higher education know that Beverly is smiling because after 17 years of extraordinary service at Tougaloo College, she's going to take a break. And the college is about to name a new president. But I'm going to tell you, they've had an extraordinary president in Beverly Hogan, and let's give her a big hand. I want to thank all the colleague presidents who are here, both on the dais and in the audience. And we've got a big party coming up on Thursday night, and more of them are going to be on the stage along with others. But this work doesn't get done without the presidents of our colleges. So please join me in expressing our appreciation and gratitude to the presidents of all the HBCUs, whether UNCF or not, who are here today. Give them a hand. All right. Now, I was told I only had a certain amount of time, and I'm going to try and stay in my time limit. I've written up what I have to say. But I was just kind of getting you all to pay attention, All right, so good afternoon, and welcome to the United Negro College Fund's 75th anniversary celebration. We are thrilled to host this luncheon and talk about a vital national education issue, the state of our historically black colleges and universities. And in a word, the state of our HBCUs is resilient. Why resilient, you ask? Because in spite of obstacles and barriers, assaults and attacks, underinvestment and devaluation, HBCUs persist in the pursuit and execution of their mission. And they produce often, against the odds, strong, impressive results and impacts, educational, economic, and societal impacts for their students, the communities in which they are located, and for our nation. In spite of individual and collective challenges, they persist. They fight for their cause and constituents, remain true to their values, and they produce outsized results because they are resilient. Now, as Senator Kane noted, I think he had read my speech, that 2019 not only marks UNCF's 75th year, but it also marks the 400th year since the first enslaved Africans were brought to Virginia in 1619. Now, there could be a dispute about whether they were slaves or indentured servants. I know this, they didn't get to walk wherever they wanted to and do whatever they wanted to do once they got to Virginia. Oftentimes, the nation's HBCUs are compared with some of the oldest and most well-resourced institutions of higher education. Harvard University, for example, is 383 years old, founded in 1636, 17 years after the first enslaved Africans arrived in Virginia. For the succeeding 250 years, as Harvard and other institutions thrived and accumulated assets derived in part from an economy dependent upon slave labor, enslaved people were forbidden to receive an education. It would be 201 years after the founding of Harvard before the establishment of the African Institute for Colored Youth, the predecessor of Cheney State University in Pennsylvania, thus the first historically black college. Another 30 years would elapse and a civil war would be fought before more colleges and for the formerly enslaved people would be established. So make no mistake, at UNCF we know that a 250-year head start means something and makes a difference. That is 250 years of systematic exclusion of black people from educational institutions. And it means that the first black colleges had to establish programs not only to educate, but to be civic vehicles of social justice and inclusion. The 250-year head start contributed considerably to the still increasing American wealth gap. 1/3, ladies and gentlemen, of all assets held by colleges and universities, 1/3, 33%, are concentrated in the country's 10 wealthiest universities. And not one of those is an HBCU. The wealth inequality in American higher education is a mirror image of the wealth gap in American society writ large. Educational inequality is a direct result of racial discrimination against black students and the institutions created for them, and where so many have chosen to matriculate for over a century and a half. Simply put, HBCUs have been historically undervalued and under-resourced, and then adding insult to injury, devalued and disparaged. But notwithstanding all of the obstacles, the assaults, the questions of their value, the questions of their need, the questions of their relevance, HBCUs have persisted, shown themselves resilient, and produced strong results. Today, HBCUs account for only 3% of the nation's colleges and universities. They enroll 10% of all African American undergraduates, yet they produce 17% of all bachelor's degrees earned by African Americans. When compared with institutions that serve low-income, first-generation college students, not when they're compared against those 10 top institutions that have 33% of all the assets, but when compared against their non-HBCU peers, HBCUs have higher graduation rates for black students. HBCUs lead in improving economic outcomes for their underserved populations. HBCUs are engines of social and economic mobility, HBCUs award a quarter of the STEM degrees earned by African Americans, often in the fields driven by today's information economy. As recently as 2015, HBCUs provided over 134,000 jobs for their local communities. HBCUs have an aggregate national economic impact of nearly $15 billion. HBCUs have historically prepared leaders in the African American community and continue to do so today. Last year's historic runs for governor in my home state of Georgia and in Florida by HBCU alums Stacey Abrams and Andrew Gillum demonstrate the enduring civic impact of these institutions and their alumni. While those are powerful examples of what HBCUs have done, our 75th celebration at UNCF is importantly about focusing on what UNCF is doing now and preparing our agenda for the future. So today, in our nation's capital, UNCF's call to action includes our message to the United States Congress. Over the last 2 years, the Congress has been a notably strong and consequential partner for UNCF and for HBCUs. Last year, congressional actions produced $109 million in funding increases for HBCU-related programs, $109 million more. Now, at UNCF, we deeply appreciate congressional leadership, congressional legislation, and appropriations increases, but we cannot be complacent when so much is needed. If HBCUs are to catch up with the institutions that had a 250-year head start. And make no mistake, our aspirations are to lead, not to follow. Give yourselves a hand. So today, we call upon the Congress to support an ambitious UNCF legislative and appropriations agenda. First, we urge Congress to increase funding of Title III Part B in the amount of $100 million. Now, Title III Part B is a foundational financial building block for all HBCUs, enabling institutions to allocate funds within federal guidelines to meet the specific needs of those institutions. More funding is needed, and it is needed in this Congress. Second, a decade of funding for the Title III mandatory program is due to expire this year. The funding must be extended for another 10-year period. That extension will ensure our students studying STEM and other critical fields will not face an $85 million cliff before the end of this year. Congress should pass this extension as soon as possible, not waiting until the last minute. And the extension should be for 10 years for $850 million. Third, for our institutions to supply to support fully and to prepare innovatively our talented and ambitious students, HBCUs must continue to address deferred maintenance, invest in infrastructure, and accelerate new construction. We are thankful that UNCF was able to take a leadership role in working with the current administration and the Congress, most notably Congresswoman Alma Adams. Give her a hand. To successfully add deferment to the HBCU Capital Finance Program. Now, we note that the House Education and Labor Committee is looking into investments in infrastructure, importantly for our K through 12 schools. Likewise, however, today, UNCF is calling for a $1 billion investment in HBCU infrastructure program. $1 billion, y'all. You could do some clapping on that. To preserve and upgrade our historic structures, improve technology, and expand capacity. Investments in HBCU infrastructure would reduce reliance on debt financing and spur more private philanthropic contributions. We urge the Congress to authorize and appropriate $1 billion for an HBCU infrastructure investment fund. I think I heard Senator Kaine talking about an infrastructure fund. Senator, we have the legislation you need. A $1 billion HBCU infrastructure fund. Fourth, just as we believe our HBCUs would be stronger if they were less reliant on loans and debt financing, we believe all low-income students would be stronger if they were less reliant on loans to cover their college education costs. As our nation's premier minority scholarship provider, we know the power, we know the benefits of grants to students to accelerate student progress toward degree completion. Therefore, we call on Congress to double the Pell Grants. Double the Pell Grants. Restore their lost purchasing power so that the neediest students can attain college degrees without taking on burdensome, often crippling amounts of student loan debt. Fifth, and finally, today I call upon the Congress to review the procedures and decisions of higher education's regional accreditors. I'm starting to mess now, okay? I call upon the Congress to review the procedures and decisions of higher education's regional accreditors and the harsh, seemingly disparate, too often existential, punishing sanctions handed out to historically black colleges and universities. As far back as 2008, scholars have sounded the alarm bells based on their research findings, concluding that, and I quote, decisions handed down by regional accreditors are inconsistent and unpredictable, and minority-serving institutions, including historically black colleges and universities, tend to receive harsher sanctions than other institutions, end quote. A recent internal review by UNCF's Frederick Douglass Patterson Research Institute notes that while 80 HBCUs that represent roughly 10% of the membership of the Southern Association of Colleges and Schools Commission on Colleges, SACSCOC, during the 2017-2018 timeframe, HBCUs were handed down over 30% of all SACSCOC's sanctions. 10% of the HBCU members receive 30% of the sanctions. We never get enough, we never get more when it's good. We always get it when it's bad. Just as black students in schools across this nation have been targets of and subject to disparate and harsher punishments than their non-black peers, it would appear that historically black colleges and universities are receiving disparate and inequitable punishments and sanctions from regional accreditors. As articulated by the Department of Education, and again, I quote, the goal of accreditation is to ensure that education provided by institutions of higher education meets acceptable levels of quality. Simple, clear, direct. But consistently, the SACSCOC focus is most intense on HBCU enrollment size and finances, apparently biased against small institutions with modest financial resources. SACSCOC President Bell Whelan is quoted as saying, and again, I quote, I'm afraid we're going to see more and more small private institutions either close or get dropped from membership, end quote. The bias against small private colleges reflected in these words and the disparate punishments handed down by SACSCOC compel me to urge immediate congressional review of regional actions relative to historically black colleges and universities. In the weeks ahead, UNCF will also urge Secretary DeVos to initiate a review of accreditation within the Department of Education. Now, departmental actions notwithstanding, I believe that the harsh and disparate sanctions handed down to HBCUs have reached a crisis that requires transparent, urgent, and visible public review by the United States Congress. Congress is, in my judgment, best able to assure that all institutions receive fair, unbiased, and equitable treatment. Regional accreditors and their executives are not entitled to predict future accreditation outcomes. When expressed, their biased views become self-fulfilling prophecies, and I fear that they influence adversely and give license to the biased, often skeptical, and openly hostile views of members who populate the peer committees that review, judge, and determine the fate of our institutions. The recent appeal process accorded to Bennett College for Women is a case in point. Having been advised that the college's one and only issue, financial assets, could be addressed if the college raised an additional $5 million, was disregarded when the college showed that it had in fact raised nearly double that amount. New fundraising was dismissed as unsustainable. New standards were introduced, and the college was summarily denied its accreditation. Such actions demonstrate the arbitrary, harsh, disparate treatment historically leveled against historically black colleges and universities. Now, UNCF stood with Bennett during its fundraising campaign and will continue to stand with Bennett during its judicial proceedings, appeal proceedings, just as we stand with Payne College during its continued legal appeal. The president of Payne is right over there. Give him a hand. He needs some support too. Just as we stood a decade ago with Edward Waters College, when we successfully joined in their challenge, in their judicial appeal, and helped them regain regional accreditation. Thus, these are our 5 federal policy, authorization, and appropriation initiatives that we will pursue with the Congress and the administration. Individually, each represents either a long-standing priority of the HBCU community, or, as in the case of the regional accreditors, an emerging and urgent matter that requires attention now if HBCUs are to thrive. UNCF will work with other HBCU community partners, and in the case of the Pell Grants, with the broad coalition that has advocated for increased Pell Grant funding from the very beginning. Education at all levels, and certainly at the college degree level, is more important than ever in our nation's history. HBCUs have performed a yeoman's role in providing college opportunities for our students, and we will continue to do so. But we need more support, and we need that support now. Since our founding in 1944, UNCF has had 2 major foci: our historically black colleges and universities. Those were our institutions and our students. We remain laser focused on both. I am heartened by the strong community support expressed that UNCF is right to inaugurate this State of HBCU event. And we are committed to growing it and expanding this event annually, bringing more of our HBCU voices. And that is a diverse set of voices. It's not just some harmony of all the same voices. We intend to bring more institutions and constituents together under an ever bigger tent. I want to thank you all for joining us today. The program is not quite over, particularly as we celebrate our 75th. We are more committed and more determined than ever to call our Congress, the administration, and our nation to act in behalf of HBCUs and the students that we serve, believing as we do in the power of our cause and our shared belief that a mind is a terrible thing to waste, but a wonderful thing to invest in. Thank you all, and God bless you.
Tough going after Dr. Lomax. Hi, my name is Ladrigus Murray. I'm the Vice President for Public Policy and Government Affairs at UNCF. I do want to recognize a senator that just came in, and he stood with UNCF over the last year to make some real impact for schools like Philander Smith College in Little Rock, Arkansas, and that is Senator John Bozeman. He just walked out with the president of Philander Smith. Some important business about to happen. We want to just underscore the great work that UNCF has taken up in the past year and the successes that we've made with the help of a bipartisan group of congressmen and senators. Dr. Lomax mentioned the $109+ million increase of federal funding over the last 2 fiscal years, but over the last calendar year, 2018. That has been tremendously impactful for the colleges and universities that we serve. Included in that, and in addition to that, there's been a great deal of increase for low-income students and first-generation students at our institutions. The Pell Grant has grown for the first time in decades. You heard Dr. Lomax call for an even greater increase in the Pell Grant. And we have been instrumental in the passage of the first comprehensive criminal justice reform package in decades, and you're going to see that work on criminal and social justice become more and more part of the work that UNCF is doing to support the students holistically that attend our institutions, as well as the colleges and universities that we serve. We're committed to taking a positive and proactive agenda to Capitol Hill and making sure that members of Congress get a chance to hear it, join in, and we're looking for more to join you, right, Dr. Adams? And making sure that this work gets done. And so in that vein, UNCF today is releasing its 2019 Congressional Honor Roll. And so what you're going to find is roughly 10% of the Senate, 10 senators made this list in a bipartisan fashion. And you're going to find that roughly 49 members of the House made this list in a bipartisan fashion. And these are the movers and the shakers in the HBCU community. These are the folks that are writing the letters, that are proposing the amendments, that are getting items put into legislation that becomes law, that help our colleges and universities and help the students that attend our colleges and universities. All the members of Congress that are here, still here today, that are on the honor roll, would you please stand? Senator Bozeman, let's get those that are here on the honor roll to come to the front. Congressman Gomer, let's come to the front. Senator Bozeman, Congresswoman Adams. Mr. Chairman, could you please come up? Those that are still here on the honor roll, we want everyone to see you because we believe in saying thank you to the members of Congress that make things happen for our colleges and for our students. Right up front, Senator. We're going to have our president, Dr. Lomax, our members chair, all of our presidents, UNCF presidents and others. This is photo time, ladies and gentlemen. All of our presidents come to the front. Let's join the members of Congress that are on the honor roll.
We got to surround them. You can stand next to your president.
Let me know. I would love to.
That's right. Come on up front. We're going to squeeze in quickly, ladies and gentlemen. Now we're going to ask to still stay in some order because we've yet to hear. Ladies and gentlemen, still stay in some order because we've yet to hear from the godmother of HBCUs today. Hasn't our master of ceremony done a wonderful job today? Yes, sir. We went to college together. Welcome back to your forefront, Representative Sellers.
Good. All right. We are almost done. Ladies and gentlemen, I promise you, we're going to treat you like Elizabeth Taylor treated all 7 of her husbands for the remaining of the program, which means we're not going to keep you long. But we do have a few things that we have to get through, and I want to say that I am the new father of 57-day-old twins. And no, that's why this is a day trip. And I've told something struck out in Dr. Lomax's speech. One of the list of things that I put down on the board for me to provide as a father, and I'm not sure everybody understands this, but folk in this room understand it, was that I wanted my children to be able to go to school debt-free. And that's something that black parents put at the top of their list. And so the UNCF over the last 75 years, if you think about what's occurred during that time from 1955 with Emmett Till to Briggs v. Elliott in 49 and Sarah Mae Fleming in 54 and Rosa Parks in 55 and the Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights Act. You had the death of Kennedy, King, and the Orangeburg Massacre all in 68. Everything that this organization has been through, all the way through the election of that other tall, skinny guy with a funny name named Barack Hussein Obama, this organization has seen it all, and even more importantly, has been resilient and persevere. And so I want to make sure that we keep this going because I get the awesome opportunity of introducing someone who exemplifies that resilience and recognize Dr. Phyllis Worthy Dawkins, the president of Bennett College. And I believe, I said this earlier, that I am standing amongst awesome women who lead these institutions. And my little girl is named Sadie. She's named Sadie after the wife of Benjamin Elijah Mays, of course. But I can rest assured that if my little girl wants to grow up and be like any of these 3 women on the stage, she's going to be a fine, fearless, resilient leader. The president of Bennett College.
All right.
Thank you, Mr. Bakari, Dr. Lomax, Mr. Rodriguez-Murray, and UNCF. Each of you stood with Bennett and saw us through a difficult time. And as Dr. Lomax mentioned, too many of our institutions face these challenges. Bennett College was founded in 1873 and became a women's-only institution in 1926. We have 146 years of existence. We prepare women of color, strong women, women of color who go on to be leaders in their fields, women who are known as global citizens, women who are known as innovators, entrepreneurs, communicators, and women that promote social justice. I also want to just share with you briefly that we are going through some challenging times. I think everybody in the nation knows that, right? In the world, actually, knows that Bennett is going through a lawsuit against our accrediting body, SAT-COC. And all we're asking for is justice, to be treated just like other institutions who have faced similar challenges. And when they found new money, they were remanded back to the CNR Review Committee. Let me highlight that it was the appeals panel, a panel of our peers, that voted against Bennett College, though they are members of SACS, and we do need to review policies. But I also want to take this time and thank many of you who donated, particularly UNCF, who called me many times, had conference calls with me, trying to help me strategize, trying to figure out what resources were under their umbrella that I could use. So thank you, UNCF, Dr. Lomax. I also want to take time to thank my fellow presidents, started with Dr. Artis from Bennett College, whose board members collectively in one envelope sent me all these checks, personal checks that each one had written, followed by Spelman College. Their leadership team sent me personal checks, and then the rest is history. Many of you, many UNCF presidents sent personal checks from 1,000 to 10,000. Yes, presidents, one of you sent me a check for 10,000. So I want to thank you. I also want to say, before I introduce Congresswoman Alma Adams, I also want to thank the many organizations that supported us. And it started with the AKAs. Now, I need to say I'm a Delta, all right? I'm a Delta. But I want to know, to let you know, Glenda Glover, stand up, Glenda. Yes. Okay? Glenda Glover called me in my darkest moment. Not only did she call me one time, at one point, Glenda and I were probably talking on a regular basis around 11:30 at night. I said, this lady never sleeps. But then followed and joined by members of Delta, Sigma Thetas, Omegas, and so forth, and the men of Alpha Phi Alpha, and many other sororities and fraternities. I also want to acknowledge NAFIO, Leslie Baskerville, who fought hard to help us, as well as the presidents of Thurgood Marshall. It was truly, in 60 days, we raised $9.5 million. Unbelievable. And what I liked about that campaign, it was the grassroots. You hear about the $1 million donations, but what you don't hear about is the elementary school class that gave us $72 in quarters, okay? Or the Guilford County School District that gave me $8,000. Or the city of Greensboro that read a resolution in support of Bennett College. Or the Women's College Coalition that came together. Or the National Council of Negro Women. I can just go on and on and on, where in the end, we doubled the number of corporations, foundations, organizations, and let me just say the faith-based leaders came together. So we went from 18 faith-based leaders given to 166 that personally delivered their checks Sunday after Sunday, some of them. So I just want to take time and thank you. Now to introduce one of my favorite supporters and members of Congress, Representative Alma Adams, who I am very proud to introduce to you today. Representative Adams is a two-time HBCU alum, but also a Bennett Belle. A Bennett Belle. She served as a professor for over 40 years. During her 3 terms in Congress, Representative Adams has promoted quality education for all students, spearheading legislation to boost funds for HBCUs, providing nutritious breakfast in schools, and supporting increased pay for teachers. In addition, Dr. Adams is a member of numerous caucus and committees, and is the founder of the first ever Congressional Bipartisan HBCU Caucus. As a former educator, Representative Adams has dedicated her career to improving the lives of young people in her community. Prior to her election to Congress, Dr. Adams served in the North Carolina General Assembly for 20 years, rising to become the chair of the North Carolina Legislative Black Caucus, and was instrumental in passing legislation that improved the climate for quality, affordable health care in the state. Representative Adams also pioneered the Displaced Homemakers Bill and successfully spearheaded the state's first minimum wage increase in 9 years. She also served on the Greensboro City Council and was the first African American woman ever elected to the Greensboro School Board. This week, on Thursday, we will join her team and participate in the STEAM roundtable discussions led by Rhonda Fox. So I want to ask you to help me bring forth Congresswoman Alma S. Adams.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I'm going to try to follow directions as well. And Dr. Lomax, thank you for speaking truth to power and for following your script. I'm going to try to do that a little bit and not get off like the president does. Good afternoon, everyone. I want to thank Madam President for her kind introduction and for your leadership and for your support and for all of the opportunities that you give so many young women. I do want to just acknowledge our MC, Bakari Sellers. He may not remember me, but I worked alongside your father, Cleveland Sellers, and we did a number of things in the community, and I think you followed him around like a little boy. You're a little skinny young man, but clearly you have good roots and you're a chip off the old block. I watch you on CNN, and I too am very, very proud of you. I am so delighted to join this historic day in celebration in recognition of the 75th anniversary of one of our nation's most storied institutions, the United Negro College Fund. Happy birthday, UNCF. You know, W.E.B. Du Bois reminded us of all of the civil rights for which the world has struggled and fought for more than 500 years. The right to learn is undoubtedly the most fundamental. And I want to thank UNCF for continuing to press that issue for so many young people. I bring you greetings from the 12th Congressional District in Mecklenburg and Charlotte. And the HBCU that I represent there now is JCSU, the Golden Bulls. I bring you greetings from our students and our president, Dr. Armbruster. I also want to bring greetings from the U.S. House of Representatives and to give a particular shout out to the chair of the Education and Labor Committee, who I've had the privilege of working under his tutelage since I arrived in Congress. Bobby Scott, I want to thank you for your personal support. And Dr. Lomax, I haven't had a chance to talk to Dr. Scott yet, but we're going to work on those things. And we are going to hold Congress accountable. And I believe we need to hold SACS accountable as well. And I'm going to be at the table, hopefully trying to get my colleagues involved in this process because clearly no school, not another HBCU, should close. You know, we've had too many to close already. And certainly to close for dollars, you know, we've got to do something about that. But let me just say, I do want to bring you greetings as well from the Congressional Black Caucus, who's worked diligently over the years to preserve and sustain our schools. We're known as the conscience of the Congress. And you know, around this place, you really have to have that. I do bring you greetings as well from our chair, Karen Bass. But last but not least, I bring you greetings from the Congressional Bipartisan HBCU Caucus, a coalition of 85 members all dedicated to making sure our HBCUs not only survive, but they thrive. As you've heard, I am a proud two-time graduate of North Carolina A&T State University, spent 40 years on Bennett's campus. A poor black girl walking the ghetto streets of Newark, New Jersey, my mom did domestic work, but she understood the value of an education. And while she didn't get a degree from an HBCU or NSCU, she made sure that her children would go on to college. And so I was able to go on to North Carolina A&T. I wasn't fully prepared, wasn't as smart as this gentleman right here. But North Carolina A&T took me in. They saw something in me. They made an investment in me. They saw what I could do and what I could become. And I give thanks to North Carolina A&T because after leaving North Carolina A&T, I was able to go on to The Ohio State University to get my PhD, but only because of the North Carolina A&T and HBCU. You know, as we convene this week to honor UNCF and all of its 37 member institutions, it behooves us to reflect on the well-trodden path that our students and our schools have traveled, not only since UNCF's founding, but since the founding of our oldest HBCU, Cheyney University, in 1837. And from the depths of oppression and discrimination, our HBCUs have made a way out of no way. And I've got to tell you, I'm like Fannie Lou Hamer. I'm sick and tired of that old question. Why do we need HBCUs? To what in the hell would we do without our HBCUs? You know, HBCUs have molded the minds of some of America's greatest leaders and contributed to our country a millionfold on our government's initial investment. And that truth is more than self-evident because we have schools with limited resources still producing more than 25% of all African American STEM graduates, 40% of all African American engineers, 50% of all African American lawyers and public school teachers, and 80% of all African American judges. But now, as we progress through a 21st century that presents us with new opportunities and new challenges, we need more than a few kind words and a pittance of financing. We need immediate and targeted action. Ladies and gentlemen, the state of our HBCUs is strong. But we're HBCU strong because of the young, talented students and the professors that walk its halls and the leadership that sets its course. But even the most untrained observer can see cracks in our foundation, both figuratively and literally. Our community banded together, as you heard, to raise over $9 million for Bennett College. And I thank our president for leading that charge and UNCF for supporting in this effort. And that effort shows that the dedication of our HBCU family. We have got to pull together and have the kinds of discussions that will enable us to make sure that our schools continue to survive. But the fact of the matter is, if government hadn't made deliberate choices that put our schools behind the curve, there would be no need for us to dig into our pockets the way we had to over those just 60 days. And those choices could only have been made because for too long our government has not been concerned with the unique interests and the needs of our HBCUs. And that's why I founded the first Congressional Bipartisan HBCU Caucus. And that's why I've dedicated my career to the issues and the concerns of our schools. A robust infrastructure package. We need to get that. Our schools are over a century years old. 9 of them celebrated 150 years. You know, we don't have all that bling bling, but we've got some other things. But we need that too. A dedicated plan of engagement by both our government and public partners and a strong pipeline that establishes our students and graduates as leaders in the 21st century workforce. Those are the issues that I urge our community to address in the 116th Congress, and the bipartisan HBCU caucus resolves to stand with each of you in making these aspirations a reality. And so as we celebrate this week UNCF's 75 years of collective advocacy, of helping to make a college education a reality of millions of African Americans, of building a pipeline of highly qualified college graduates, we can reflect on how far we've come. But let's also focus on holding our government accountable and chart a path, a course forward for the next 75 years of glory. Because as Dr. Lomax has said, and we all know, indeed, a mind is a terrible thing, especially a black mind, to waste, but a wonderful thing to invest in. God bless you. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, I have learned a great lesson growing up and being married, which is that sometimes you just leave well enough alone. The godmother of HBCUs in Congress, Dr. Alma Adams, gave us an amazing closing here. I want to thank all of you all for coming. Thank Senator Scott for coming. Thank all of our congresspersons and senators for coming. I learned from historically black college that in all things that you do them so well that no man living, dead, or yet to be born can do them better. We embrace excellence in this room, and we will carry that from henceforth forward and on to the Capitol. And in the words of Congresswoman Adams, without HBCUs, what the hell will we be doing out there? Thank you, and God bless you all.